For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6 and verse 12. Today we are going to talk about warfare. And we are going to look at Genesis chapter 14 in continuing with our series on Abram that we have titled Abraham's Seed, after a book of that name. And we are going to use Genesis chapter 14 to draw out patterns of warfare, which, as with all warfare that we participate in, it's both spiritual and physical, because there's a spiritual aspect where we address the principalities and the powers and the rulers of the darkness of this world and against spiritual wickedness in high places. And then the physical acts of faith that we take to address that warfare and to make sure there's manifestation of victory in our lives. But before we begin, let me start by saying welcome to those who are coming back. I love you so much for taking this journey with me. And you are the reason I'm doing this. You're the reason I sit down and shoot those videos. And I have seen that we have been getting more and more visitors, more and more subscribers. So I would like to say welcome. Feel at home. Let's learn and grow together. And the comment section is for you. So feel free to write your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, in addition to what we're doing. That's why we're building a community. Because what you bring in and what I bring in, when you put together, then it becomes something beautiful. So let's get to Genesis chapter 14. And I have called it the War of the Kings. And there are 7 distinct parties who took place in the war that is recorded in Genesis chapter 14. Let me go through the details quickly, and then we'll go through to look at the patterns of spiritual warfare. And whatever else I remember to put in, I will put in as anecdotes as we're discussing Genesis chapter 14. Okay? So it was a war of kings that Abram just happened to be involved in as a matter of necessity. And we'll look at that when we get to that point. So this is where I would like to begin this discourse by saying that when God blesses you, He always sends you help and He gives you favor. So the blessing of the Lord we've already discussed and say that it is first and foremost Jesus Christ. And when the blessing of the Lord comes upon your life, it assures peace for you, shalom. And that peace manifests in 5 different areas. There'll be peace between you and God. There'll be peace between you and other people. There'll be peace between you and yourself. There'll be peace between you and the ground. And the ground we're thinking here in terms of our labor, our work, opportunities for multiplication. That you can put in 5 and bring out 500. To learn more about the ground and the pattern of multiplication, go and look at the video that is titled Wealth God's Way, still in this series. And then finally, the 5th aspect of peace that is restored is between you and the earth. And the earth, we are thinking in terms of the entirety of God's creation. The entirety of God's creation. Anywhere in the universe on this earth where God's breath is, everything that He created and formed and measured out, peace is restored. And what that means is that wherever you go, there's been no one and nothing trying to fight you. And if there are instances where there are people who are dedicated to the kingdom of darkness, and therefore they stand up to try and fight you, then God will help you to gain victory by defeating them. So, and also as we're looking through this Genesis chapter 14, we learn some principles of warfare. And I want us to highlight one right now before we proceed. So in spiritual warfare, much like physical warfare, there are 2 things which matter most. Number 1, strength, and number 2, rank. Strength is in terms of numbers, the people who are on your side, and also strength in terms of who fights on your side. Because you can have numbers, but within your team, the people who are coming with you, maybe they don't have the skill, they don't have the expertise, and they do not have the experience to fight with you. So when you're thinking strength, think in terms of numbers and also who fights on your side. Because if you are coming up with 10 people against an army of 200, then chances are they will overwhelm you. But if the people you're fighting with, they might be 10 people, but they have expertise, experience, and skill, then your chances get better. And number 2 is rank. Rank in terms of, number 1, experience. I've already mentioned that experience, in a way, experience gives you an edge. And expertise. That's why in the military, the higher you climb, the more expertise you have, and therefore the more people you can have under you. The greater the number of people you can command. It's because you have grown in skill and expertise. And skill and expertise is gained based on your history of victories and losses. You fight to get stronger, and you fight to get higher in rank. So you cannot say that you are a Christian, you are a believer, you are strong in faith, you are great in the spirit, but you have never fought. Because strength and expertise is measured in the battlefield. And from the victory that you gain in the battlefield, then your rank grows. Okay, so I hope you have understood that principle. That's principle number 1. We'll keep adding them as we go through our discussion today. Going on from now, I'm working on the assumption that you've read Genesis chapter 14. It is 24 verses and it's an interesting read. There are 7 parties involved in this war of kings. And the first party that we're introduced to is a party made up of 4 kingdoms and their kings. And the principal head, the prince over this party of 4 kingdoms and their kings, was a man called Chedorlaomer, who was a king of Elam. And the first party, they attacked and subdued the second group. And the second group was made up of 5 nations, 5 kingdoms and their kings. And their princes, the principal kings over these nations, were the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. Princes are appointed when you go to war. In a war of kings, a prince is appointed. So in a way, he becomes the general over the entire army. Okay? That's why Christ is a Prince of Peace. Because in the armies of heaven, there are many different distinct kings among the angels. But Christ is a Prince of Peace because they all answer to him. I hope you understand that. But when they're doing their administration and their ruling, then he's the King of Kings. Because in daily operational activities, they report to him. Christ is also the Lord of hosts. Because in all the armies of heaven, he is a commander of them. You understand? So yeah, the princes for the second group, which was 5 nations and their kings, were the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. So the first party attacked the second party, and when they subdued them, the second party ended up serving the first party for 12 years. But after the 12 years, they rebelled on the 13th year. And rebellion, now this is the second principle of spiritual warfare. In rebellion usually happens when the party that is subdued is tired of the oppression, and they become angry enough to convince them that they can fight against their oppressors and win. This is a principle of deliverance actually in spiritual warfare. Deliverance happens only when the person that is being plagued is desperate enough to get angry and rebel against the systems that the enemy has built in their life to subdue them. So most of the time, deliverance happens only for the people who are already tired and desperate for change. They're tired of the situation they've been living in and they're desperate for change. If you're still okay, if you're still complacent, then deliverance will not come to you. Most of the time, you will not even notice that there's any kind of spiritual warfare you're facing. If you're okay with the way things are, then deliverance will not be available for you because you will not even want it. Because the way the Lord works is you get only what you ask. The Lord is very fair like that way, that you have to use your free will to ask him for something, and then he will give it to you. You have to use your free will to knock at a door, and then the door will be opened. You have to use your free will to seek a different way of things happening in your life, and then you will find it. So that's a second principle of spiritual warfare, and this is a principle pattern of deliverance. You have to hit the enemy for you to be able to seek deliverance. And so it happened with the second group. So because Chedorlaomer and his friends realized that the second group was a bit stronger than they had been when they were subdued the first time, what they did is they attacked a third group. Okay? And this group, they are the Rephaims, the Zulmims, the Emims, and Horites. So they defeated the third group, and then principally whoever is beaten becomes servant to the victor. And so the third group became servant to the victor. And what happens when you gain servants in a battle? Their armies become your armies. So the first group, in terms of numbers, they had grown. Okay? So you become bigger and stronger, as we have already highlighted, by fighting and winning. You become weaker by losing. So after that, the second group went up against the first in battle. Because when you see an army marching towards you, then you march on. And here we learn about the third principle of spiritual warfare. Jesus Christ himself taught it actually. We'll highlight it shortly. So the second group went up against the first in battle, and they met in the valley of Siddim. And the first group, because their armies had grown by combining the third group's armies, they beat the second, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fell into the slime pits. So the princes fell into the slime pits, and the rest of their group fled into the mountains. This is how Christ taught it. No one can plunder a house before first subduing the strong man. So when you go to plunder, first you bind the strong man, and then you go in and plunder the goods. It's the same thing that happened here. The kings, who are the princes of the entire army of the second group, when they fell into the slime pit, the entire army scattered, and therefore the first group were open to go in and plunder, and they did. Okay? So after that, Chedorlaomer and his group, they went and plundered Sodom and Gomorrah, and they carried away spoils. Spoils of cattle, people, children, slaves, gold, silver, and among those, Lot and his entire household were carried away. And here we also pick the fourth principle of spiritual warfare before we move on. If a king knows there's another king coming up against him, and he knows he's too weak to fight and win, then he sues for peace. Anytime you pick a fight with your brother in Christ, you can be sure that that battle, no one will come out a winner. So in that instance, you sue for peace. The only time you do not sue for peace is when you're coming up against the devil. Because as long as Christ is on your side, then you will win. But if it is a confrontation between you and a fellow brother, you sue for peace. Because there's no way that battle ends with one of you winning. Okay? So you do not fight against flesh and blood. You don't go up against flesh and blood. You address the spirits behind whatever battle is going on. And then with your brother, physically, you sue for peace. So now we move on to the fourth group in this war. As people were being carried away, one of the people in Sodom and Gomorrah, he snuck away, and he came and reported to Abram about what had become of his nephew Lot. Okay, so now we meet Abram, who's the fourth group, the fourth party in this battle. I keep saying battle, it was a war. So Abram and his entire household were the fourth party in this war. So Abram had become a great household in that land. After he moved to the plains of Mamre, God had been good to him. The people around him, they welcomed him and they became friends, and it became a place where he could grow and rest. Because if you can find peace, then you can rest. And true building with the Lord on your side happens at the point where you have rested, When you rest, it means you have not so much strife, and therefore you can actually accumulate wealth. So Abram had become a great man in the land. The Lord had made his name great as he had promised. And indeed, he was blessed. His silver had increased, his gold had increased, his cattle had increased, and the servants and the slaves and even the people who just wanted to be a part of his household, they had increased. Because anywhere the Lord's blessing is, people are drawn to it. Because the things that we seek, normal men seek, once they see that it can be found in your household, then they will come. When you build something great, people come. And that's what happened with Abram. So Abram at this point had become Abram of Hebron, or Abram the Hebrew. And his encampment had become to be known as the Hebrews. And Abram was a prince over the Hebrews. That's the fourth party. And the fifth party are the friends and the neighbors that Abram lived among. These are the Anars, the Eshkols, and the Mamres. This formed the fifth group. So Abram sued to his friends, these three nations which formed the fifth group, and they took up arms, his entire household and households of these three great men, and they pursued the first group to Dan. Remember, anytime an army plunders and they take the animals, they take the children, they take the women, they take the men. Most of the time, the people they are taking away, they are not soldiers. Therefore, they cannot walk so fast. So they met them at the plains of Dan, where they ambushed them at night. And after they were ambushed, of course, the army men ran away and they left the plundered goods behind. And so they pursued the army to Damascus, and there they won. The fourth and fifth group fought and won against the first group. And when you win, you plunder the goods of the enemy. So they took back everything that the first group had plundered from Sodom and Gomorrah. And of course, they got back Lot and his entire household. And after this, the news of a victory spread. So Abram and his friends beat the first army that the Chedorlaomer was the prince of. And Abram, who was head of his household, was also prince over this army that came together to go and fight and win against them. So there are two parties that came to meet Abram when they were coming back from their victorious battle. And here is where we are introduced to the sixth party in this war of kings. And we are introduced to him as Melchizedek, king of Salem. And we're also told that he was priest of the Most High God. And in this place is where you're also introduced to the seventh party in this war, who's the Most High God. The Most High God is the name of God, and it's also a dimension of the characteristic of God, which is among his roles as King of Kings, he is also the one who oversees all battles where kings and kingdoms are involved. He decides who wins, who loses. He decides who becomes bigger, who becomes smaller. He decides who is to be lifted up and who is to be cast down. He's the one who raises up and he's the one who brings down. So, King of Salem and priest of the Most High God were introduced to as Melchizedek. He came out to meet Abram after the battle in Dan and Damascus, and he began by offering him bread and wine. And he blessed him in the name of the Most High God. Melchizedek is the one who introduced Abram to the Most High God. Before that, Abram knew him as the God of glory. He knew him as the Lord, and he knew him as God. He had never been introduced to the Most High God. The Most High God is an all-powerful, all-seeing, all-knowing God, and the one who decides who rules and who is deposed. So he blessed Abram in the name of the Most High God, and he also blessed the name of the Lord for giving Abram victory. Okay? And bread in the Bible is always a sign of revelation. Okay? because you cannot share bread and wine with someone without there being a rapport and a revelation. So he offered him bread, which is a revelation of the Most High God. And in that moment, Abram learned something new about God. And he offered him wine. Wine is life. Wine is the Spirit of God. Wine is light. And therefore the eyes of Abram were opened to see the reality of the situation he was in. And Abram, in response, he gave him a tithe, a tenth of his spoils. Now, in warfare, we all know you do not give gifts to anyone who is not greater than you. The only time people pay tribute is to a higher power, a higher king. So in the physical, the king of Salem, Melchizedek, was actually a stronger king than all the other parties put together. And in the spiritual, he is the priest of the Most High God. So after this encounter, the other person that came to meet Abram is the prince of the second group, who was the king of Sodom. And he asked Abram to return his people, but to keep the property recovered. Now, in war, in principles of war, whoever wins keeps the spoils. So the people actually belong to Abram and his friends. But Sodom, the king of Sodom came and sued and said, you can keep the property, you can keep the cattle, the silver, the gold, but please just give me back the people. But Abram declined, and he said, you can take everything. The only thing we are keeping is what is due to my friends, the fifth group. So the fifth group received their spoils of war, but Abram declined his share. So in a way, the king of Sodom was asking Abram to do him a favor. But Abram did him a blessing. He gave him back everything except what he had given as a tithe and what was due to his friends, the fifth group who came out to fight with him. Because spoils of war have to be there. If you have fought but you have not received any spoil back, then it means you have not finished that battle. The battle does not stop at deliverance. Now, this is the other principle that we're learning today. I think it's the fourth principle of spiritual warfare. The war does not end at deliverance. You have to get deliverance. Then from deliverance, with your freedom, exercise your free will to gain dominion. Dominion is rulership. And then with whatever you gain as dominion, then you can use it to build a dynasty. Do you know what a dynasty means? Is where now you begin to introduce the concept of spiritual blessing into your bloodline. You leave an inheritance for your children and your children's children. You build something that is so big that you can then hand over to your children. And that involves you training your children in the ways of the Lord from the moment they are born. Even while in the womb, you speak to them about the Lord. Because as you're handing over inheritance to your children, the first thing you should be giving them, the greatest inheritance, is the Lords of Lords. Your relationship with God should be the first thing you give to your children. And then all the material things follow. All the lessons of life, all the ways of conduct, how you train them to be gentlemen and ladies, how you train them to lead people, to rule over people, comes after you have taught them how to be priests before God. And here in meeting Melchizedek, we're taught about the principle of kingly priesthoods. For we are priests and kings. So the inheritance you give to your children is, number one, you teach them about priesthood. Priesthood is service to the Most High God. You teach them how to cultivate a relationship with the Most High God. You teach them how to cultivate a relationship with God. And then you teach them how to be kings. Teaching them how to be kings is, we minister before God, but we lead people. We offer service to God, but we lead people. It does not matter whether you are an intern in a company, you are there as a king. And because you're there as a king who bows to the King of Kings, you have to learn all the protocols of the kingdom of heaven. You have to learn how to speak to people, how to present yourself, how to dress well. As a man, you have to learn how to be a man who is head and submitted to Christ. As a woman, you have to learn how to be a woman. The woman who invests, the one who's very strategic in all her moves, the woman who knows how to control her emotions, the woman who has learned discretion and wisdom, as it says in Proverbs. The right kind of woman, the woman who builds her house, the woman who establishes her house. Because in Genesis chapter 3, it says that it's the seed of a woman who crushes the head of the serpent. And it's first Christ, but secondly, it's how we raise our children as women. Are you raising a generation who will crush the head of the serpent at every turn? Are you teaching your children how to be strong? Are you teaching your children that self-love is showing up for yourself every day, working hard at your dreams, making sure you present your best to the world at all times? Are you, as a woman, the kind of woman who people will be glad to be associated with? When you present yourself, are you trying to use your sexual characteristics to gain favor with people? Or are you presenting yourself as smart, as capable, as educated, as skilled, and you have something to offer to the market? Are you tactical and strategic in your moves? That is how to operate as a king and as a queen. We are royalty. Are you dressing as royalty, or are you dressing as trash? Gentlemen, are your trousers so tight we can see everything God gave you? Are you dressing as a man for the male gaze? Because by the time you're wearing those tight trousers, then you're dressing for the male gaze. You want other men to stare at your behind. Because we women, we don't care about your behind. Do you care more about what your peers think about you than you care about taking care of your family? Are you afraid that if you treat your wife or your girlfriend properly, people will call you a simp? Are you chasing the ideas of the world, or are you chasing the ideas of God? Are you focused, dedicated to building a future for your family and your generations? Or are you more interested in impressing your friends by spending money you have not yet earned, by buying things you don't really need? Are you living and acting like a king? Are you doing whatever it takes to gain favor with man, or are you depending on God? And that is, I think, the sixth principle of spiritual warfare we're learning today. Genesis chapter 14, verse 22 and 23. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand in an oath to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread or sandal strap or anything that belongs to you. So you can never say, I made Abram rich. You see, in these verses, we're told about the interaction and the transactions that happened when Abram met with Melchizedek, the king of Salem. That he raised his hand in an oath to the Lord. He got a revelation of the God Most High, and he raised his hand in an oath to the Lord, that from today, I will not have anything in my life in lieu of property or people or influence or increase that I cannot say unequivocally that I have gained from my interactions with the Lord. That God, if you do not do it, I do not want it. If you do not give it, I will not receive it. God, if you do not raise me up, then I will stay where I am. God, if you do not settle me, then I will stay wandering, searching for you. God, if you do not lead, I am not going anywhere. That is what Abram did after his interaction with the king of Salem. So without the revelation of the God, Most High God, Abram could have taken this maybe as a sign that God was indeed blessing him, and he would have taken the spoil. But he had just had an encounter with God and a revelation of another dimension of him. So anytime you have a revelation of another dimension of God, then a principle in your heart changes, it shifts. And a new posture in your heart is born. And as you continue to meditate on the word of God regarding that situation, regarding that interaction, then more and more that system, that stronghold of the Lord Most High is established in your life and it becomes apparent. So the condition of his heart had become of a man who is totally surrendered to God. And his level of discernment had increased. So he said no to the gifts, and his answer was very simple. I will not take anything that is yours, lest you say I have made Abram rich. That I am making a pledge today before the God Most High. No one will ever say, I had a hand in what Abram has become today. That when I'm praying, when I'm offering sacrifice, never again will I have to give a tithe to any man. I will only give a tithe to God. Never again will I have to pay an ode to any man. I will only pay an ode to God. Because even when men are in my life to lift me up, it's God who will have sent them. So in his interaction with Melchizedek, king of Salem, then the revelation of God being the source of all good things, such as riches and honor, had been affirmed. And from there, then he acted in faith. That is our seventh principle of warfare. From the revelation of God, then you act in faith in the physical. And the result sometimes looks not very pleasant in the physical. Even in the moment, you might look stupid to your peers. You might look even foolish to the person who's making an offer to you. But at the end of the day, you know whom you have believed. And you know the oath you made with God in your secret place. At the moment when he revealed to you another dimension of himself, you know the oath you made. And you know because God is faithful, you have to answer his faithfulness with your faithfulness. So that is what we had to learn today. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you have learned something. I hope you wrote those principles down. Because life is a battle. Before we go, there's another principle that we skipped in the middle there that I want to highlight. You notice that when the soldiers were defeated, then it was easy to plunder. And that's why we are told, we as Christians, we should take the posture of soldiers. Put on your whole armor. Because anytime the soldier is defeated, then the rest are counted as spoil. So if you're not in battle, if you're not fighting, then you're automatically spoiled. You're automatically plundered. So do not live in a life where you think you can be lukewarm and survive. You're either hot or cold. You're either for or against the Lord. There's no middle ground. There are no gray areas in this life. So choose wisely. I love you so much. God loves you more, and I will see you in the next one.